Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is get this cat out of the way. Come on, get out of the way. You don't need to be there. Um, I'm going to be animating a live ball hop, and I'm going to be talking about the differences between a bounce versus a hop. So we've already animated the bouncing balls. We understand how we can show different physical properties by changing timing and the behaviors of the bounces. Now I want to show how we take some of those same mechanics and alter them so it looks like a character hopping, jumping versus just bouncing physics. One of the differences between a hop versus a bounce is the animation principle of anticipation, the idea that there is some sort of a wind up before the bounce, before that jump. So that anticipation is what creates this appearance of intentionality. Now, once the character's in the air, it's actually very similar to a bounce, and you'll see that as I start to animate it. The other feature of a hop versus a bounce is the landing is going to have overlap and follow through, and it's going to have this sort of period of recovery after the landing. I've got my character rig referenced. If I go File, Reference Editor here, and pull this over in here, you can see there's my Mooly ball. I've referenced in that A namespace. I'm going to hit F to frame it up. And I'm going to do a couple of little things just to make my life easier. I'm going to select the main control of the character. I'm going to launch pose to shelf here. And I'm going to go like this, do selection to self. So I have a button that allows me to select that main controller. If I click that button, it selects that main controller. And then I'm also going to make buttons to select all of the tail controls. So I'm going to grab this one here, and I'm going to say pose to shelf, selection, there's tail 1, pose to shelf, selection shelf, there's tail 2, selection shelf, selection shelf. Now you can see all these buttons. Now this is a little kludgy. I actually want something that's going to be a bit easier to work with. I'd like to stack it all under one button. So I'm going to go like this, and I'm going to take these commands, edit. And so see, this is the command that it's using. I'm going to go like this, copy, and I'm going to go to my main, and I'm going to go edit pop-up, and I'm going to make some pop-up items. So I'm going to go like this, tail all plus, whoops, this is one thing I find vexing, is that you have to hit enter on your key, tail 1, like this. So under tail all, I'm going to go like this, paste that command, and I'm also going to paste it under, oops, tail 1 like that. So I'm just making some buttons to select everything, and then this button here, edit, there's that command for the second tail, copy that, and then I'm going to go back to here, edit pop-up, and say tail all. So I want the second control. So there's tail master control, tail control, and then I'm going to go plus and go tail 2, boink, and paste that there, boink, tail 1 control, and then tail all, da, 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 and add that there. And then the last control, edit, tail 3 control, copy, let's see, edit, tail 2 control. Okay, I've got the sense of how these things are, edit pop-up, how these things are labeled. So there's tail 1, tail 2, tail 3, and tail 4. I think there's a tail 4. Is there a tail 4? Nope, I guess tail 3. Silly Dave, I'm making up controls that don't exist. So there's 1, 2, and 3. Okay, and then I'm going to go 1, 2, tail 3, like that. So I'm just making these buttons for myself to kind of speed up the process of animating, and also so that I don't have to actually have the controls visible. The other control that I'm going to want to have available to me through a shelf button, so now I don't need these anymore. I can go delete, 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 delete. The other control that I'm going to want to have available is that squash and stretch controller. So I'm going to say show squash. Where is it? Click. There we go. Come on, wake up. There we go. And I'm going to also make a pose to shelf button to select that object as well. Edit, grab that command, copy, and then I'm going to go here, edit pop-up, and I'm going to say plus and move that up. I'm going to say squash. And I'm going to go like this. Blink, like there. So select -CL and grab that squash control in there. and then I can get rid of that, delete. So now I've got this one button that if I click it, I'm going to grab the main control. And actually, I'm going to go here, edit. If I double click it, I'm going to grab the squash and stretch controller. Whoops, close that down. Oh, Wing, you got a question?
Oh yeah, for the control, like every time I make it, but
Mhm.
it did not follow like from which I like saving Maya. It just like every time I like open it, it will like
Oh, it
if I
disappears from the
yeah
shelf?
yeah if
So
I
there's a
yeah
couple of possibilities there of why that's happening. The first is make sure that you go save all shelves, and that'll save it locally. If
mm,
you're moving around from one place to another,
mm,
you'll want to make sure that in your documents,
mm,
Maya, you can see this as I'm going through.
yeah
The version of Maya is, in this case, I'm using 2022.
mm,
Prefs, there's a folder called shelves. And
mm,
inside that folder, you'll see a button for or a mel
mm,
script for every single shelf you have. And so, for example, here is my custom shelf right here. And if I
mm,
open that up, it's just a text file, and you can see all the buttons I've made. If I go down here to the very bottom, there's this new button that I've got. Let's see.
mm,
Oh, interesting. It looks like it's got the old buttons. I'm just going back through here and looking at the names of the buttons. Da, da, da. Yeah, so there's main control, a main
mm,
control. You can see all the buttons that I've created. So if you take those shelves and you copy it, say you go to the school and you're working there and go into your documents there,
mm,
Maya version prefs shelves, just take
mm,
that shelf and copy it into your folder while Maya is closed. When you open Maya, all those tools will show up. So one of the things animators typically do is they'll travel around with a thumb drive and they'll have their icons, scripts, and shelves on that folder. And whenever they sit down at a news station, they grab those three folders and they drop it into the Maya that's installed there, and boom, all their tools show up.
oh
And so
okay
that might be it. The other possibility, like I say, is if you're not remembering to go save all shelves when you've made revisions here, that stuff will disappear as well.
Yeah, but if I have like two document, I need to every every button I need to like make on it. It can like save in this file and
Yeah,
like the
I
other
definitely
file.
I wouldn't want to do it multiple times. Now, the funny thing is I do actually end up recreating my prefs constantly because I teach. I
Mm,
at the start of the term, I always nuke my prefs or well, I create a new install of Maya so that as I need tools, I'm creating them in real time so you can see that stuff. But yeah, I have for working professionally, I have a set of prefs with a ton of scripts and stuff that I use all the time. I've got that I fire it up whenever I want. And I just do it by dropping those shelves and those scripts and those icons into the folder, and boom, they show up in Maya. Now it's important. Maya has to be closed when you do that because one of the things Maya does is every time you close Maya, it also saves all shelves. So whatever the current state of Maya is, it will overwrite anything you've revised manually. So
yeah. Okay.
um,
Okay.
but now, out of curiosity, when you're creating buttons on when you're working at home,
Mm.
do those things still stay or do they disappear at home as well?
Still stay like
Okay,
when I like create in the bouncing ball and when I doing the series, it will like stay here. But I changed from the series. When I reopen the bouncing ball, the series will like
right.
the
Okay, yeah.
control it.
Now, and
Yeah.
the other thing to remember too is if I go here to my reference editor, the character is got an A namespace, which means these tools here, if I go here, edit, you can see it's actually looking specifically for an A namespace. If I changed that namespace or referenced a character in with a different namespace, the tool
Mm.
wouldn't work because it's
Oh,
looking specifically for that control.
oh, yeah.
Okay,
Okay. Thank you.
good question. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to set my scene range to 20 frames because that's going to be enough for what I'm animating. And I'll actually start by animating a bounce, just like we've done before. And for folks that have struggled with the bouncing ball, uh, let's see. Oh, and I see a couple of comments in the chat about what the differences between a bounce and a hop might be. So there might be little or no difference in height. Correct, Oscar. The bounce eases in and out more. Yes, there is a difference to how it starts the jump, that anticipation. But once it leaves the ground, it's exactly like a bounce. A hop is exactly like a bounce. So yeah, good job on the chat there. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and let me turn off my squash and stretch controller. I don't need that anymore. I can still select it by double clicking here. I've got my squash controller selected, even though you can't see it. And I can, let's see, click squash. There we go. Boy, mine is being weirdly unresponsive. Rotate X. There we go. So you can see I can still manipulate that squash and stretch controller. And I'm actually going to go like this, S to key those two channels there. And I'm going to animate a bounce, just like we've done before. I'm going to do a couple little things as well to make it easier to see. I'm going to go under the animation menu, visualize, create editable motion trail, and I'm going to add a motion trail to the character, even though I haven't actually animated anything yet. I'm also going to say show none, show NURBS curves, show polygons, show NURBS surfaces, and finally show motion trails. So the only things I'm interested in. And as always, I'm going to turn off selectability on the things that I don't normally interact with. So the only things I want to select are animation controls. And I can either do it manually in the screen, or I can go like this and grab them that way as well, now that I've made this tool for myself. So simple bounce. I'm going to set a key here on, let's see, translate Z and translate Y. Those are the two channels I'm going to be using here. I'm just going to do a straightforward bounce. I'm going to go to frame 20 and I'm going to move the character forward like this and hit S to key again. So it's just a short move forward like that, about, I don't know, 2 body lengths, something like that. I'm going to go to the halfway point. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Interesting. So this is going to be challenging because it's an uneven number of frames. So I'm just going to go like this. I'm going to move this back 1. So now I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So the halfway point is frame 10. Translate that character up. And let's say show motion trails. Oh, interesting. The motion trail isn't updating. Let me select that motion trail. Yeah, okay. I'm going to go like this, and I'm going to go to my animation preferences, and I'm going to click on animation, and let's see, parallel, DG. I'm just toggling back and forth between the two. There we go. So sometimes motion trails don't update until you sort of manually move the character in this window. Now you can see that motion trail showing the movement of my character. However, if I grab that motion trail and oh right, I've got selectability of those objects turned off. Grab that motion trail. I'm going to hit Control A for a second, and that pulls up the attribute. And I'm going to say show frame crosses, and I'm going to make those a little brighter so they're easier to see. Let's go with yellow, bright yellow, like that. And then let's change the size so they're just a little larger. So you can see my spacing, even though the arc looks correct, my spacing is not correct. It should be easing in and easing out at the top, and it should be accelerating towards the bottom. So it means I have to do some work in the graph editor. So I'm going to launch that graph editor, and I can do that by window, animation editor, graph editor. Or if I do control shift and click, it'll put that button on my shelf like that. And so now I can take that button, put it here, and get rid of that one. So there's my graph editor. I can click that button anytime I want. So that's control shift and then go through a menu. So if I go to control shift, Windows, animation editor, graph editor, and I'm holding down control shift as I do that, boom, there's that button appears on my shelf. So I'm going to pull up that graph editor, and of course, it's going to show me based on whatever I have selected. So the first thing I need to do is the translate, whether it's Z or X, whatever direction the character is going in, just like a bounce, that's going to be linear. That the second the character leaves the ground to the moment it lands, that movement forward is going to be a straight function. Translate Y, I'm going to grab those handles and I'm going to move them up like this, get that nice parabola. And let's see, frame that up. Oops, that was weird. There we go, like that. There we go, that nice parabolic arc. And now when I look at my motion trail, you can see it's not updating at the moment. Let me go like this. Dun, dun, dun. Interesting. Yeah, that motion trail is just not going to update. Let me try setting parallel. Save. There we go. Yeah, it's just not going to update that motion trail. So I'm just going to go like this, visualize, create editable motion trail. And now I'm going to grab that A and show frame crosses and boink, 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 and then frame cross size. There we go. And so now you can see the spacing, big space here, little spaces here. It's easing in and easing out. So that is a proper bounce. Immediately leaves the ground and immediately lands. Now let's check the timing of that. Little slow. I'm going to speed that up a teensy bit. I'm going to say, let's go with 1, 2, 3, 4 frames on the ground there, and 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's see. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Just like a bounce, the hop, if it's traveling on a level surface, same number of frames to the apex as to the bottom. So far, it's no different than a bounce. Nothing I've done is any different than a character bouncing. Now I'm going to start doing the stuff that changes it from a hop to a bounce, or from a bounce to a hop, rather. Open up my graph editor here. Because I've moved those keys, I have to fix my tangent handles. So let's see here. Grab U and translate Y. Grab that. I'm going to pull that handle up. Pull that handle up, get that nice parabola. And yeah, it's interesting. My motion trails, that's linear still, so that's good. Yeah, my motion trails just will not update. Vexing. Okay, let's see how that looks. I'm going to pull it down just a little bit here. There we go. Oh, there, it updated my motion trail now. And I think I'll give it one more frame on either side. There we go. And then adjust those tangent handles down a little bit, frame him up, because this will get a little square up at the top. There we go. And then let's see here. There we go. Yeah, it's funny. It doesn't update the motion trail until I actually manually change it in the viewport, which is super annoying. Okay, so there is a bounce. Now I'm going to start adding the stuff that turns it into a hop. And the first thing I'm going to add is an anticipation. So typically in animation, the idea of an anticipation is it's signaling to the audience, hey, pay attention, something's going to happen. And as much as possible, it tries to give you a hint of what is going to happen so that you don't miss it. So if a character were jumping forward and up in the air, what might I want to do with the anticipation to sort of signal to the audience that this character is about to do that? Any ideas? You can share in the chat, or you can unmute your microphone and tell me what you think. Give it a moment. Any ideas? What might I do for an anticipation? And think about any cartoon you've ever seen, a character getting ready to run off screen, and they do something to anticipate that they're about to run off screen. What do? Roll back? Yeah. Yeah. If I'm going this way, I'm going to anticipate the other way. So I wind up and then I go. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to use my graph editor as a visual. I'm going to say translate Z. If I'm heading from left to right, like you can see in the hair curve here, I'm going to go here, click on translate Z, S to key, frame it up. I'm going to grab this here. I'm going to take a buffer curve snapshot just so I can sort of see what I had before. Let me open this up a little bit. And I'm going to say, okay, let's do flat and then pull the handle down like that. And you can see by doing that, it's already creating this sort of wind up that the character moves back and then forward. And let's see what that looks like in the viewport. So you can see character winds back and then jumps forward. And you know what? These motion trails are just not updating. Quite vexing. Let's see here. Clickety click. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so there we go. Character moves back and then forward. And because the character is jumping in the air, I'm also going to add a little bit of a crouch down as well. So I'm going to go here, and just before he takes off, he sort of crouches down like this and up a little bit. So it's going to do like a little circle and up like that, just a little like that. So let's just see what just that little physical anticipation does to our bounce. There, you can see that teeny little wind up just before the character takes off. And I'm actually going to give it a little bit more time here. I'm going to go 1, 2. I'm going to move that just a couple of frames. Go like this, go like this. Yeah, let's see, what does that look like? There we go. Give it a little bit more time to take place. Hup, hup, hup. There we go. So there's just a little bit of an anticipation already. Now that's going pretty low into the ground. I probably can't go that low. Let's see here. But I bet you with squash and stretch, I can sort of deal with that. So there to there, and then jump in the air. Okay, fantastic. So now let's grab our squash and stretch controller, and I'm gonna actually like grab main controller, and I'm gonna show the squash just so you can see what it is I'm doing with the squash and stretch controller. Double click, grab that squash and stretch controller. Again, I'm going to say, okay, from the moment the character takes off in the air here, I'm just going to do like we would with the bounce, where I stretch the character a little bit, and I'm holding down the control key and middle mouse dragging whilst I click on the word squash, and that allows me in the viewport to sort of adjust that attribute. And then I click on rotate X, and again, holding the control key, I'm going to angle the tangent of that stretch along the path of travel or the path of action. So that's my first sort of squash and stretch bit of behavior. Again, very similar to what we have with a normal bounce. At the apex, I'm going to zero both those out. I'm going to make sure that as the character is traveling up, and this was a really common one on the bouncy balls that people missed, is I want to keep it facing along that axis like that. Even if after a couple of frames, the character is sort of going to round. And same thing here, coming in for the landing. I'm going to stretch the character a little bit, and I'm going to rotate it in the opposite direction again, following along that path of travel towards the apex here. Rotate that back. There we go. So jump there. So no different than a bouncing ball. But what's going to be different here is how I deal with the squash. So I'm going to take the squash, and for the live ball assignment, if you read the description, this character is animating like a lively, playful squirrel. So I'm thinking of the physics, the mechanics of squirrels as I'm animating this. So I'm going to say, okay, then at this point here, I'm going to squash it, but I'm actually going to keep it angled in the same direction that it's going. So it sort of looks like the squirrel's little butt is kind of stretching up in the air and the head's dipping down. I might even rotate it a little further like this, and then round. So ordinarily I would do squash immediately into stretch, but because he's still touching the ground here, I'm going to go squash, round, stretch like that, which again is a difference from a bounce versus a hop. The hop, he's accelerating off the ground. And as long as he's touching the ground, he's able to sort of apply more energy. Once he leaves the ground, it's exactly like a bounce. But up until that moment, that wind up can be very different. And then I'm going to do something else here. I'm going to actually have him stretch a teeny bit in anticipation, rotate in the opposite direction that he's traveling. So he sort of stretches back, squashes, and here I'm going to tilt him a bit, squash him a bit less, tilt him forward like that. There we go. So there's that anticipation. And now on here, down 0. Let's see what that looks like now. So there's that wind up, that anticipation. And let me turn off NURBS curves and turn off that squash and stretch control. Pause that for a sec. Show squash. There we go. Turn that off. Don't need to see motion trails for the moment. Let's see what that looks like. So there's the difference between a hop versus a bounce, just with anticipation, that wind up. And you can start to see it creates this illusion of the character is actually motivating the movement rather than just physics and the properties of the object. Now, on the other side of it, this landing, we're going to do an overshoot or a follow through. Overlap and follow through is another one of those animation principles. Overlap is the idea that not all parts of the character start at the same time and end at the same time. So it's not really overlap that we're doing here. What we're doing is follow through, the idea that things don't come to an immediate stop. So In the same vein that the anticipation is sort of winding up away from the action to signal, hey, I'm about to jump in the other direction, the overshoot or this follow through is going to be that the action sort of carries forward and then returns back to its intended target. So we're going to do sort of the same kind of action in the opposite direction as the anticipation. So I'm going to turn on my nerves curves here. I'm going to turn on my motion trails just so I can see that. I'm going to grab that main control here. And I'm going to use my graph editor again for that visual and say, well, if he's traveling in Z forward like this, I'm going to put a key at 20, S to key, and I'm going to grab this and say, okay, new buffer curve. Let's grab this key, flatten him out, and then I'll pull him like that. So again, he's linear. And then I'm going to take this one, and I'm just going to have him drift a little bit forward of his landing position like that. So he sort of comes to a stop here. And then on the translate Y, you can see by adding a key here, it's already created that overshoot just by spline interpolation. So I'm going to take a buffer curve snapshot there. And let's see how much that squashes down. Let's see. And then I'm just going to use my squash and stretch control for the rest of it. So let's see. I'm going to turn on my squash and stretch control so we can see it and double click to select it there. So here he's landing there, round. Yeah, that looks good. And then here I'm going to squash him a little bit like this. But I'm going to tilt him the other way that he's sort of like almost putting on the brakes. He's going sploosh. And then here back to round again like that and zero him out a little bit quicker. So wind up, jump, and splooch. And let's see here. I'm just going to go to the apex and main control there. And then my animated motion trail is being a little daffy. There we go. There we go. Boom. And I could probably give a few more frames for that recovery. Let's say 22. Yeah, I'll extend it to 22 frames because I want him to end up in his starting position here like this. I'm going to pull him back a little bit like he overshoots and recovers. Now I'm going to have to make a new motion trail because this one only went to frame 20. Like this. Visualize, create editable motion trail. Grab that motion trail attribute editor, show frame crosses, color, click, there we go. And then frame cross size, crank that up a little bit just so we can see it. Okay. There we go. So he sort of lands, overshoots, and recovers back to his starting position. And now we're ready for another hop again, like that. So that is sort of the mechanical difference between a hop and a bounce. We have that anticipation at the beginning, the character wind up, getting ready to jump. We have that follow through at the end of the character landing. But once the character's in the air, mechanically, it's very similar to a bounce. The translate Z or X, whichever direction the character is going, is linear, and the translate Y is that nice parabola. If it's on a level surface, same number of frames to the apex as to the bottom, very much like a bounce. Because truthfully, once a character is in the air, barring wearing a jetpack or having wings or some way that they can change their movement, they're very much like a bouncing ball. It's just physics of an object moving through space. Whatever energy they leave the ground with, that's all the energy they have. Gravity is a constant pulling the character down. And so you get a result that's very much like a bounce. The difference is when we get into there, hang a sec. The anticipation and the follow through, that's what makes it a hop. And I'm just going to grab that main control and hide my squash. There we go. So we can sort of see that animation. Oops, backwards. Silly Dave. Okay. Now, the other thing that I'm going to animate is I want to show the movement of the tail, and that's the overlapping action. So it's similar to the rigid pendulum that we've done before, that idea of a piece of drapery moving behind. Now, unlike the rigid pendulum, this isn't going to be a heavy metal thing. A squirrel tail, it's fluffy, it's light, it's airy, it's deflected by air, and it also has a motive force of its own. The squirrel can flick its tail, it can change it, do all sorts of things like that. But for this hopping part, I'm just going to have that tail flow through. And so I'm going to animate that next. But before I do, we're going to take a break. It's 9 o'clock. So I'm going to stop my share for a second. And as I always do, I try and make sure we structure a 10-minute break for every hour that we're working. So get up, stretch your legs, get a breath of fresh air. When we get back, I'm going to animate the overlapping action of the tail. But for now, stretch your legs, get a breath of fresh air, build those good RSI fighting habits while we're gone. I'm going to pause the recording, turn off my camera, and mute my mic. And if you could, do me a favor, remind me if I forget to start recording when we come back. There we go. All right, welcome back, everybody. I'm going to resume the demo, and let me go ahead and share my screen. There we go. You should see the My User interface up on your screen. Give me a thumbs up if you can see that. Is that showing up for you? All right, excellent. Kyle, you're still unmuted.
Oh,
There you go. Excellent. Okay, so you can see here we've got just a jump, and this is basically taking what we started with as a bounce, and then we added an anticipation and then a follow through to create the impression of it being a hop or a jump instead. Now the other thing that I wanted to show you is how the squirrel tail is going to behave to get that result that we're interested in. So I'm going to turn on my nerves curves here for a sec. I'm going to go like this and grab the tail. Oops, that button, grab tail all. I'm going to key it, and I'm going to put sort of a starting pose on that tail that's just sort of a classic squirrel looking kind of pose here. I'm only rotating in the X axis on that tail like that. Get this up like that, raise this up like this a little bit. Actually, this one I'll go back like that and get that sort of that S curve that kind of we associate with being a classically a squirrel thing. Now, one of the tools that you're going to want for this task when you're animating the tail on your live ball is you're going to want BH Ghost, this tool here. And for BH Ghost to work, of course, we all know that you have to select the geometry of the character's tail to add it to the thing. Now, the geo here is set in a display layer to be a reference, so you can't select it. So you have to turn that off in order to be able to select that tail. The other way that you could do it is go to your outliner and open up the hierarchy of the character. And if you go down here, you'll see the tail geo group, and there's that tail geo. That's the thing that we want to select and add to BH Ghost. So when I open up BH Ghost here, just click that little triangle and say add selected mesh in there. It'll show up in there. And now whenever I hit ghost, it'll be ghosting that tail. Now, in order to see the ghosting, I have to have show strokes turned on. And I'm also going to show my animated motion trail because that's actually going to help me with animating my tail. So I'm going to ghost that tail and put that outline. And now you can see as the character moves away, that outline is there. Now, the big thing with the squirrel tail is unlike the rigid pendulum or sort of a heavy metal pendulum, this thing is basically a thin bone tail with flesh and then fluffy fur around it. So it's like a feather boa. It deflects with the air. It's very light and airy. The character can move the tail. It is sort of prehensile in that he has control over a tail like a cat. And so there'll be times where I'm animating the tail, twitching and flicking and doing squirrel-like behavior. But for the jumping stuff, I'm just going to have it flow along behind the character, overlapping along behind the action, the main body. So as the character sort of goes back here like this, I'm just going to have that tail kind of try and retain its initial position that it's just saying, oh, you know what, I was sort of in this position here. I'm just going to try and stay there because the air deflection is kind of keeping me in that position. So as he moves back, and I'm also not going to step frame by frame like I've done with the rigid pendulum. In this case, I'm going to set a few keys and then I'll start to manage the in-betweens once I've got those initial keys set of the shapes that I want. So I'm going to go like this, tail all, key the entire tail there, the entire tail here, and I'm going to put another ghost just to show the flow of that tail. And then I'm going to go like this. I think I'll put another key here. And so I'm just going to zero out the tail starting position and do something like this. Just curling up like this, flowing along, maybe this one curling like that. So using the period, comma to step forward to my next key. So squashing back like that. Yeah, maybe flow along a little bit more like that. There we go. And it almost starts to feel like the tail is flowing through itself a little bit. There, and then, yeah, I'm happy with that. Tail all, S key again. Now, I'm not actually using the rotate Y and the rotate Z, but I'm keying those channels for now, just in case I had the character turning and wanting the tail to do something else. Now, for this, I'm not actually going to be using those channels, so I can just go like this, delete selected, and just focus on the rotate X. And then this pose here, again, I'm going to zero that tail out, grab the base of the tail, bend it down like this. I'm going to go back here and say ghost just so I can see that last position here. Go like this. And that tail is just flowing along, overlapping behind the character like this. There we go. Ghost again. And then I'm going to get to about here, and let's zero that tail out again. Oops, tail all like that. Zero. Grab that base. And I keep forgetting, I made all those tools for myself to select individual controls, so I don't actually have to see them. And this is the nice thing about the BH Ghost is no matter what angle I'm at, I can sort of see the shape, the flow of that tail as I animate along. Grab these two here like this, and there, Ghost. There we go. Step to the previous key, tail all. There we go. And then here, zero that tail out, go like this. And I'm going to have that tail flowing along the path of the character's movement. So that path of action is going to be flowing along like that. Sort of, there we go. Grab the tail all, S to key. So you can see I'm just putting those keys along the way. I'll ghost there as well. And then coming in for the landing. Oftentimes, you'll see I've done this a few times now where I select the entire tail, and before I make a pose, I zero everything out. I just go like this, zero. That's been done so many times. I'm starting to think, you know what? I should actually just have that as an option here. So I'm going to go open up my pose to shelf, and I'm going to say zero pose, that zero pose. I'm going to pose to shelf like that, and here's that command. And it's just saying, hey, these tail controls set their values to zero. I'm going to copy that command, and then I'm going to go here, edit pop-up, and I'm going to say tail all. I'm going to make a new button called tail zero. I'm going to move it to the very top. Like that. So now, if I want to reset that tail, I can easily do that. So for example, I'm here and I'm like, oh, you know what? I want to just zero that tail out. Let me get rid of that button there. I just go tail zero. That didn't do what I expected. Edit pop up. Oh, you know what? I bet you it didn't save the command, silly Dave, because I didn't paste it in there. There we go. Save all shelves. Okay, now tail zero. There we go. Okay, flowing along. And again, the tail is always sort of thinking about, well, where was I before? What was I doing before? I'm just going to kind of try and stay there and flow along. And so the base is getting pulled along with the character, but the rest of the tail is kind of flowing along lightly behind the character. Each piece of it's sort of like, well, what was it doing before? It just wants to keep doing the same thing. And then here, I'm going to go like this, zero that tail out. Grab that base, curl it up like this. Like that. Yes. There. Grab the tip like that. Just flowing along with where he was before, the tip of the tail kind of there. And now I can start to add some of those in-betweens to get a better action. So for example, here, I want that tail to kind of stay down in its same position like this. So I'm just going to compress it down a little bit like this. So it's, there we go. Always thinking about where it was before. And then 3, let's see, tail all, S to key this. Like where it is at 4. 3, again, I'm just going to pull it down a teensy bit like this. And like this. The tip of the tail, there we go, it's trying to stay in the same position like that. Oh no, you know what? I'm going to do like this. Try something different here. Let's open this up just a little bit. Pull this tail tip down a little bit. There we go. There we go. Open you up a little bit. There. And then this moment, pull this down a little bit. Pull this in a little bit like that. So you can see the tail starting to flow along. And I'm going to bust all for a second. I just want to see from this moment here, ghost. This moment here, ghost like that. Yeah, okay, so I want you up a little bit more. You back a little bit more like that. Sort of get it halfway between like that. There we go. And you know what? This one, I think I actually want further back like this. And like that. Just opening up that tail a little bit more. There we go. There. Ghost. And I can hold down the Alt when I ghost to get the different color. So I can sort of see more clearly. Ghost. There we go. Easing out. There we go. That's better. Okay. Bust all. Ghost this. Now, what you're probably starting to sense is how many poses I have to put on this tail to get a nice flowing action where it flows along, following sort of where it was previously to get that nice fluffy squirrel tail kind of feel. Let's see here. You just revise this pose a little bit because I want that tip to flow along the bottom of the action like this. There we go. And then this like that, and you like that. You like that. So these in-betweens, you'll notice I'm not keying every control on the tail. There we go. That's starting to look better. Okay, bust all. Now coming in for the landing, goes this tail here. I want that tail to flow through, that it follows through on the action, that even though the body is changing direction, the tail was going down, it's going to sort of keep going down. And so I'm going to have it go like this, where the tip drops down like that. The rest of the tail kind of flows through like this. Let's see. I want it to look nice and soft and flowy. So there, boom, boom, like that, dropping down. Let's see, tail all. Ghost. Here. Ghost. Here. Looks like actually this moment here, the tail would already be starting to drop down. So like this. I guess looking at the spacing at the tip of the tail there, you know, the tip of the tail was here, then it's here. So it wants to be like somewhere down here. That essentially it's going at that speed. So I need to kind of squish up the tail a little bit more to get the tip of the tail where it needs to be. There we go. So there, there, there. He's hit the ground. He's starting to decelerate. The tail's starting to slow down, but it's still tail all. There we go. S to key, S to key, S to key. And then this moment here, tail drops down like this. That tip would flow through even more like this. That tip was here and then it was there, so it probably wants to be like somewhere around here. Go down here like this. Don't want to go through, don't want to drop in through the floor too much. Maybe pull you up a little bit, you down a little bit, you in a little bit like this, ghost, and then you like that, that tail. Always pointing at sort of where it was previously. Tail all. Oh, interesting. It looks like I didn't key every control, every channel. So this is one of the reasons why it's always a good idea as I'm doing this stuff. I need to make sure I key every, bust this one, every controller. Otherwise, as I revise the position, it might not get updated the way I expect. Goes there. Okay, so now tail all, S to key, S to key. There we go. There to there to there. You a little bit like that. There we go. And then you a little bit like that. There we go. That's better. And then ultimately, I'd like to get it back to this starting pose here, but it might take a few frames. So I'm going to go like this, tail all, and I'm going to extend this to like 24 frames. And I'm just going to middle mouse drag and S to key to get that tail back to that position like that. And then I just have to manage that transition. So how do I get from here to here? Let's see. I'm going to say, I'm going to have it sort of reverse direction like this, that the base shoots up further. So just sort of a flick to get his tail reset back to its starting position. Tail one, boink, there we go. That's where those selection buttons come in handy. So let's see here. So boink, let's see, you down like this, you down like that, you down like this, you down like this. It's that ripple flowing out through the tail. And then we get that reversal back up again. And let's see, drop you down just a little bit. Drop you back like that. There we go. It's a little quick, that reversal. Think. Tail S to key. And let's move this key further down like that. There we go. Boom. I have a feeling he probably would take more time. 26. Like that. Maybe like that. There we go. Boom, boom. There we go. Bust all. Show. Motion trails. There we go. And show NURBS curves. Let's see how that looks. So there's that tail flowing along. Hopefully feeling very much like a squirrel's tail. Overlapping. The tip of the tail, sort of the last one to get the note that, hey, the body's left already. And it's like, I was standing here, I was doing my thing. And everything's sort of overlapping as it goes along behind the tail. When the squirrel comes to a stop, it follows through and recovers. So anticipation, overlap, follow through, those are two of the big featured principles on this next assignment that we're going to be using a lot. And part of what makes it different from the bouncing ball. Now, of course, we're still going to be paying attention to arcs. We're still going to be paying attention to ease in and ease out because as you can see, the middle part of it, a bounce, a hop, no difference, you know. It's how you get into it and how you recover afterwards that starts to define the difference between a bounce and a hop. Now, that said, on this live ball assignment, because it's behaving like a squirrel, in many cases, you'll notice squirrels as they're bounding along, they deflect off the ground in a single frame. So in some cases, bouncing behavior probably will look okay, especially if the tail is flowing along. But for those larger jumps, those moments where the character's pausing and thinking, and you want to sort of create this feeling of a squirrel, those little anticipations, wriggling back and getting ready and then doing a big jump, that's where it's going to start to sell the idea that this is a living, breathing, thinking character. And that's what we're wanting from this live ball. This isn't just a physics exercise, it isn't a recap or a repeat of the bouncing ball exercise. Any questions about anything I've shown here? What I'm going to do is take this demo and I'll carve it out and save it as a separate video so that you can sort of watch it on YouTube, follow along with it, especially the tail stuff. It can take a little time to get the hang of that.